Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May he guide us and give us strength and right understanding. May love and harmony be with us all. Om peace, peace, peace. And good evening. We are working with the 4 yogas, 4 small chapters by Swami Abhedananda, and we have gone through Raja Yoga and Karma Yoga, so we are now starting Bhakti Yoga. So let's plunge right into the Yoga of Devotion.
The Bhakti Yoga. The Bhakti Yoga teaches that the final end of all religions can be reached through love and worship of the personal God, who is the creator and governor of the phenomenal universe. It leads to the same destination as all the other branches of yoga, but is especially suited for such as are emotional in their nature and have the feeling of love and devotion highly developed. It is for those devotees who, conscious of their own weakness, arising from the lack of self-control and the knowledge seek help from outside, and who, taking refuge in the Supreme, pray to him for forgiveness and pardon of sins committed through ignorance of the moral and spiritual laws that govern our lives. All dualistic systems of religion, like Christianity, Judaism, and Mohammedanism, which advocate the worship of a personal God, knowingly or unknowingly preach Bhakti Yoga and direct their adherents along this path.
All right, of course, we can update the words, of course, and use Islam or Muslim or something instead of Mohammedanism. They don't use that anymore. And they put in all these extra thes, makes it difficult to read. But that's just his style. But yes, this is the general idea of Bhakti Yoga, is that it's really the mainstream. If you look at the major religions of the world, Bhakti Yoga really is the main path of devotion, or the main path of religions is this devotional path. And so it's good to look at it from the Hindu perspective so that we get an idea of how these other traditions really do fit into the ideal of Bhakti Yoga. So let's continue.
The word bhakti means devotion, while yoga in this case signifies union of the individual soul with God. Hence, the Bhakti Yoga is the method of devotion by which true communion of the soul with the Supreme Deity is accomplished. It shows what kind of devotion and love for God will bring the soul into the most intimate relation with the Divine Being, and how even the ordinary feelings of a human heart, when directed Godward, can become the means of attaining spiritual oneness with the soul of the universe. The Raja Yoga tells us that desire, passion, love, hatred, pride, and anger must be completely conquered before perfection can be reached. The student of the Raja Yoga must not only keep constant watch over his mind, but he must also faithfully practice the 8 steps already described if he would achieve his highest ideal. While in the Bhakti Yoga, we learn that all desires and passions, whether good or bad, can be directed towards God. Then, instead of binding the soul to worldliness and earthly attachment, they become a means of attaining God consciousness and absolute freedom from selfish and wickedness. The follower of the Bhakti Yoga should feel God as closely related to his soul as he possibly can, and regard him not only as the Lord of the universe, but also as Father, mother, brother, sister, friend, or child. Even the relationship existing between husband and wife may be cultivated and developed in the heart of a lover of God, intoxicated by the soul-stirring wine of divine love. When the whole heart and soul of a bhakta, or lover of God, flow like the unbroken current of a mighty river, surmounting all barriers and dashing headlong towards the ocean of divinity. He finds no other attraction in the world, holds no other thought, cherishes no other desire, speaks no other word, and sees no other thing than that of his most beloved, the omnipresent deity. He resigns himself entirely to him and surrenders his will to the will of the Almighty One. He works, but without thinking of results. Every action of his mind and body and mind is performed simply to please his beloved. One, his motive power is love alone, and by this he breaks asunder the chain of selfishness, transcends the law of karma, and becomes free. Thus a true Bhakti Yoga, being constantly in tune with the infinite, loses the sense of I, me, and mine, and makes room for thou, thee, and thine.
Yes, so of course, yeah, that's the beautiful thing, again, about Hinduism, is that we have all of these possible relationships with God. We can think of God as father, mother, sibling, brother or sister. We can think of God as our friend, or our Lord, our master. We can think of God in so many different relations. So, and then of course there's that wonderful phrase in the Upanishads that one loves the wife or the husband not for the sake of the wife or the husband, but for the sake of the self within the wife or the husband. So all love in the earthly sense becomes transformed with that knowledge into the love of the ultimate divinity that resides in every being. And of course, we also realize that any love in this normal worldly plane of Maya is very temporary. We might think we're going to be married forever, and of course the vows are till death do us part, but that doesn't always work out that way. And sometimes one dies much earlier than the other. And so that cuts short that particular relationship. Same thing even with any relationship. Sometimes parents have to endure the sadness of losing a child as the child dies very young. So the love for the child then and the earthly tie is gone. But it's important for us always to remember that when somebody passes on, we must think of them as going to be united with the Godhead. And so our love for that person then is really redirected towards the Godhead with whom we pray that they are in union with. So that's another way of looking at this. So this power of love is so powerful that it makes us think of someone all the time. So when one falls in love, they can't get their mind off of their beloved. Or if you have a dear child, you can't get your mind off the dear child, and you worry about the safety of the child and so forth. And so this power of love is in this power of attachment. And so we want to redirect those emotions towards the Godhead, because what do we want to do? We want to always be thinking of God. And so we observe what it is we think about all the time and put God in that position. Remember that there is a song that says, put God in everything you do, put God in every being, put God in every action. In our prayer before meals, Brahman is in the ritual, Brahman's in the offering, Brahman's in he who offers to the fire that is Brahman. So we're going to see Brahman everywhere and realize that when we're attracted to someone or something or some activity, it's because Brahman is in that person or thing or activity. And so Bhakti Yoga draws on that powerful attraction. You see, it's a little like if you've ever studied a martial art. you use the power of your opponent to your advantage. So what's your opponent here is something that's detracting you from focusing on God. So you are attracted to something in the world. So you need to turn that around and not let that attraction to something in the world detract you, but let it substitute Brahman or God, the Godhead into that, and realize that's what is attracting you. And therefore, so you're turning that around and using that attraction, which often is a detraction or a distraction, and you're turning it into a tool for your sadhana. So it's sort of the martial art angle of yoga, to use things that would normally be detracting us and turning them into something which helps us. All right, let's continue his thoughts on Bhakti Yoga.
A bhakta never forgets his relation to his beloved. His mind is concentrated and one-pointed. Consequently, meditation becomes easy for him. True devotion or continuous remembrance of the divine ideal leads to unceasing meditation and ultimately lifts the soul into samadhi, where it realizes God and communes with him undisturbed by any other thought, feeling, idea, or sensation. Becoming dead to sense phenomena, it lives on the spiritual plane of God consciousness. Wherever such a yogi casts his eyes, he sees the presence of the all-pervading divinity and enjoys unbounded peace and happiness at every moment of his life. It is for this reason that the Bhakti Yoga is considered to be the easiest of all methods. But a Raja Yogi attains only after years of practice. A Bhakta accomplishes that in a short time through extreme devotion and love. That which a Karma Yogi finds so difficult to achieve, a Bhakti Yogi attains easily by offering the fruits of all his works to the Almighty Source of all activity and the ultimate end of all motives.
And of course, this is why we always suggest blending the four yogas. So you can see that in your meditation practice, in your Raja Yoga practice, rather than trying to concentrate just simply on a flame in the heart or something abstract like that, you can concentrate your mind on the image of a chosen ideal where you have pointed your devotion. So your mind has an object of concentration that you're already attracted to, or you're trying to cultivate the attraction to, in the case, as the case may be. So rather than, say, just concentrating on a yantra or something, or an abstract sound like Om, you're concentrating on the name of your beloved, or the murti or picture of your beloved. And in that way, your mind more easily focuses on it. And again, in Karma Yoga, it's not all that easy to give up the results of all your actions. But if you think that God is there with you all the time working, and you're doing the work for that particular chosen ideal, then it becomes part of your Bhakti Yoga practice as well. So Karma Yoga and Bhakti Yoga end up being combined as well. Makes the Karma Yoga easier. All right.
The Bhakti Yoga has two grades. The first is called Gyani, or preparatory. Includes all the preliminary practices. The second is Para, or the state of supreme love and devotion to God. A beginner in the Bhakti Yoga should first of all prepare the ground of his heart by freeing it from attachment to earthly objects and sense pleasures. Then by arousing in it extreme longing to see God, to realize divinity, to go to the source of all knowledge, and to reach perfection and God consciousness in this life. He must be absolutely earnest and sincere. He should seek the company of a true lover of God, whose life is pure and spotless, who has renounced all worldly connections, and who has realized the true relation which the individual soul bears to the universal spirit. If by good fortune he meets such a real bhakta, he should receive from him the seed of bhakti, planted in the ground of his heart, and by faithfully following the instructions of the Master, take special care to keep it alive and make it grow till it becomes a large tree bearing the fruit of divine love. He should have respect, reverence, and love for his Master, will open his spiritual eye and transmit his own spiritual powers to his soul. When these powers begin to work, the soul will be awakened from the deep sleep of ignorance and self-delusion.
Yes, and as we're probably all familiar with, when you encounter somebody with a deep love or passion for something in the world, say a particular hobby or a particular occupation or a particular sport or particular art form, it's catching. If you stay around that person long enough, their love and devotion and attraction to whatever that is. It could be playing tennis or golf, or it could be playing the violin, or growing a particular kind of flower, or whatever the hobby tends to be. If you're around that person a lot, chances are you might, if you have any tendency towards that, you may pick up the love for that particular activity. So here he's reminding us that we need to do the same thing with our spiritual life, so that we can cultivate the love for God, be around lovers of God. And their devotion to God will also begin to be cultivated in you. You'll begin to catch that fervor of the love and devotion for God. Very frequently, this is where you get religious services that sort of rouse up the emotions. Now, sometimes, again, there can be dangers in these things if the Kundalini kind of rises too quickly through fervent chanting and singing and dancing and so forth. Sometimes the Kundalini then can come down kind of crashing afterwards, and you feel a little bit drained. So sometimes extremes in these things can also be dangerous. But the main point here is that you tend to catch this devotional attitude from others. And so it's good to be around like-minded people. All right.
The guru, or spiritual eye-opener, knowing the natural tendency of the disciple, will advise him to look upon God as his master or as his father or mother, and will thus establish a definite relation between his soul and God. Henceforth, the disciple should learn to worship or pray to the Supreme through this particular line of relation.
Particular
line of relation. At this stage, symbols, rituals, ceremonies may appeal to his mind, or he may repeat some names of the Lord that signifies the special aspects of the divinity corresponding to the relation which he bears to him. Constant repetition of such a name will help the mind of the neophyte to become concentrated within the divine being. During this period, he should avoid such company, such places, and such amusements. Those may make him forget his chosen ideal. He should live a chaste and pure life, always discriminating right from wrong, and struggling to control his passions and desires by directing them Godward. He should be angry with himself for not realizing his ideal, and he should hate his sinful nature because it keeps him away from the path of bhakti and prevents him from remembering his beloved. Thus, he will gradually succeed in correcting his faults and in gaining control over his animal nature.
Yeah, and there's this constant prayer, you see, that the Bhakta has, that they want the beloved to be with them, working with them all the time. They want to do what is pleasing to their chosen ideal. They don't want to do things that are not pleasing to the chosen ideal. And so it's not just a bunch of dry rules that you can't do this, you can't do that, and you should do this, and you should do that. But you want to do these things because they are pleasing to the chosen ideal, and you don't want to do things that aren't. And so everything is directed with this, and it makes all of those things so much easier to follow. If you really love and honor your parents, you don't want to be a mischievous little kid that's getting into trouble all the time. You try to do your best to please the parents. And so similarly in our spiritual life, we try to do things that please the divine. All right, let's continue.
A traveler on the path of bhakti should observe cleanliness of body and mind, should be truthful, and lead a simple life without injuring any living creature, mentally or physically. He should not kill any animal for his food, neither should he covet that which does not belong to him. He should furthermore obey the laws of health, which tend to make him physically strong, as well as those moral laws, the violation of which weakens the mind. So long as the devotee thinks of God with a form, believes that he is outside of the soul and the universe, he can make a mental picture of him and worship the divine ideal through that form. Or he may keep before him some symbolic figure, like the cross, which will remind him of his ideal at the time of devotion. But a bhakta should never mistake the imaginary form or the symbolic figure for the real ideal. Wherever there is such a mistake, there's to be found spiritual degeneration and the expression of ignorance in the form of sectarianism, bigotry, and fanaticism.
Yes, many Christians, they wear a cross on a chain around their neck. And I've known some Christian friends that use that as a reminder of their connection with Christ. So every time they feel it bouncing against their chin or see it against their shirt or blouse, that's a reminder to them of their connection with Jesus. And just think of what a powerful way of remembering somebody if you take the attitude that, say, Jesus has died for your sins. That's a very powerful thing. Just as if somebody had saved your life in some situation, perhaps you were going to be attacked by a wild animal, and they came and tried to wrestle the animal away and died in the process, but you survived, or they fooled you out of the way of a moving car, but then they get struck. Anything like that would happen, or a buddy in the army that falls on the grenade to save the rest of the troop, you don't forget those people. And so similarly, the Christian doesn't forget Jesus because of that connection that they held, that thought of him dying for you. So whatever the way is, that the kind of hook, you could say, that you give your mind to concentrate on God is the power of this Bhakti Yoga. So, of course, in the book, The Practice of the Presence of God, Brother Lawrence thinks of God as always being with him there, helping him wash the dishes and wash the floor and do the chores and go to the prayers and then just have an ongoing conversation with this imaginary friend, you could say, just like a little kid might have an imaginary friend that they might set the table for. There are many incidences where a child will have an imaginary friend and insists that the parents set an extra table for their little imaginary friend. So all of these kinds of ideas of keeping God in your constant thought. Really, if you think about it, the if you try to find a general idea about what religion does, if you look at all the religions of the world, and what the sort of bottom line is, it's remembrance of God. They give you some way of remembering God all the time. So you look at, say, Judaism, and in Judaism, Yahweh has set down rules and laws and regulations and things they have to do, days that they do this, days that they do that, times when they're supposed to do this, times when they're not supposed to do that, various rites and rituals for every single activity. So the whole life is centered around the rules that have been laid down by God. And so every time you follow one of those, you're remembering God. In Islam, there's a set time of prayer. And of course, this is in some Christian traditions too. You have 5 hours of prayer. And so you're never very far away from a prayer time. And so that's always on your mind. Okay, so now it's going to be another hour and a half before prayer time. So you gear your activities towards that, and your mind is constantly thinking, okay, prayer time is coming up at such and such. And then when that prayer time comes, you bow down and you do the prayers. So all of these things are ways of remembering God throughout the day. I often think that that's really a nice way to kind of analyze different traditions to see how do they do it? How do they remember God throughout the day? All right, let's continue.
Gradually, as the bhakta approaches God, you will rise above such dualistic conceptions and realize that his beloved is not only transcendent, but also immanent in nature, that nature is his body, that he dwells everywhere. He's the soul of our souls, the life of our life, and also one stupendous whole. Well, we are but his parts. The bhakta then reaches that state, which is called qualified non-dualism. He sees that from the minutest insect up to man, all living creatures are related to the Ishvara, as a part is related to the whole. Therefore, he cannot kill or injure any living being. Understanding that everything pertaining to any part belongs in reality to the whole, he says, whatever is mine is thine. And it is from this moment that absolute self-resignation and self-surrender to the will of the Ishvara begins to reign supreme in the soul of the yogi. Then he is able to say from the bottom of his heart, let thy will be done, and never again can he forget that his soul is part of Ishvara. His devotion henceforth consists in remembering this new relation, and his worship takes a new form. Whatever he does with mind or body becomes an act of worship of the supreme whole, for he realizes that he possesses no power that does not belong to God. Eating, drinking, walking, talking, and every other work of his daily life become acts of devotion. And the entire existence of such a bhakta is a continuous series of acts of worship. Then the heart is purified, and selfishness is dead.
Yes, and if you think of, if you're meditating in the shrine of the heart, in the lotus of the heart, and you're putting your Ishta in that lotus of the heart, doing your meditation there, then this body becomes a temple. And just as any physical temple needs maintenance, your body needs maintenance. And so when you're bathing in the morning, you're washing the temple, or brushing your teeth, you're washing a part of the temple. When you're eating, you're putting energy into the temple, like taking care of the electrical system in a physical temple, or lighting the candles or something. So everything that you do for the maintenance of the body isn't for a body as a body, but as a temple for the divine. And it's not permanent. No building is permanent. Some of them may last even thousands of years, but in geological times and in cosmic times, it's still a blink of an eye when you compare it to billions of years. A couple of thousand is nothing. So just because something may last a long time and compared to our human life doesn't mean it's lasting very long. It's not that you're trying to get the body to last forever, but while it's here, you're trying to take care of it. And when it's time for this temple to disintegrate and go back to its elements, that's okay. It goes back to its elements. But in the meantime, you're going to try to take care of it, and all of those things that you do, eating, drinking, sleeping, bathing, all of those activities become acts of devotion. Oh, and then it occurred to me after that, the last break that we had, the Harry Potter movie. So there's another example where the mother had shielded Harry from that death blow, and she died, and Harry got his little scar. And that was a constant theme through that movie, his connection with his mother. So that's just another illustration of that particular phenomenon as to how when one sacrifices themselves for you, you don't forget them. In a sense, all these avatars that come to Earth, what a trial to have to come and live in a physical form. When you look at Sri Ramakrishna and Holy Mother, and really their bodies did not give them a great time. They endured a lot of suffering and a lot of diseases and lots of pains. They weren't, just having a great time in their bodies. It was a great hardship for them to be embodied. And so we have to be very thankful to them and grateful that they endured this play of Maya for their times on Earth, so that we could learn by their examples. Okay, we're down to our last paragraph. So it's a little bit of a short meeting, but that's all right. Gives you more time for your devotional practices. So let's conclude with our final paragraph here.
The devotee thus rises to the second grade of Bhakti Yoga and begins to taste that divine love which is the fruit of the tree of Bhakti. Here all distinction between the lover and the beloved disappears. The lover, the loved, and the love all merge into one ocean of divinity. The soul of the bhakta is transformed, manifesting omniscience, God consciousness, perfect freedom, and all other divine qualities, and it attains to the highest ideal of the Bhakti Yoga.
Yeah, and there again, when you concentrate on someone that has very good qualities, that's a way to try to imbibe those qualities. So just as if you're trying to become a great golfer, you watch how the great golfers play. If you're trying to become a great pianist, you watch how the great pianists play, and you listen to interviews by them as to how they practice and their particular connection to their musical instrument. And so no matter what the field is, if you're in the presence of an expert, you want to pick up their good habits. You want to pick up their way of living and their way of practicing whatever it is. So similarly, by being around people that have practiced spiritual life for a long time and have the same kind of devotional practices that you do, you pick up that. There's a kind of a group energy that's helpful. Just trying to do something on your own is not always that easy, but if you come and join services, if you come to meditate with a group, it's easier to concentrate. You kind of made a commitment, say, to just like having a gym buddy. Okay, we're going to go to the gym at 5:30 in the morning. Okay, so you feel committed and you get up and you get there on time. Whereas if it were just you, maybe I won't do it today, So if you have commitments to going to religious services on a regular basis, that motivates you to be with the group that's doing these like activities, and is a very helpful part of spiritual practice. So that concludes his chapter on Bhakti Yoga. And next week we will continue with Jnana Yoga. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Filled with Brahman are the things we see. Filled with Brahman are the things we see not. From out of Brahman floweth all that is. From Brahman all, yet is it still the same. Om, peace, peace, peace.